The Foundational Principles of the Self, Cognition and Influence, a synthesis of modern behavioral science. The conglomerate of books presented, spanning psychology, neuroscience, behavioral economics, and personal development, converges on a single irreducible truth. Human reality is a construct primarily governed by two distinct, non-linear systems, the automatic subconscious and the deliberate conscious, and these systems are radically, yet predictably irrational, making the mastery of self and influence the central challenge of the human condition. The underlying narrative is a complex instruction manual for navigating existence, built upon a hierarchy of foundational principles. E. The irreducible duality of the mind and the limits of rationality. The first principle extracted from this collection, informed by Blink, predictably irrational, the power of habit, thinking fast and slow, implied by context and how emotions are made, is that the mind operates on a duality of process. This is the core truth that reason is not the default, but a costly optional override. A. System 1. Dominance and the architecture of prediction. The vast majority of human activity is handled by System 1, the automatic intuitive mind, which constantly seeks to conserve cognitive energy. This system is not merely fast, it is a prediction engine. It builds mental models, shortcuts, heuristics, and associations to instantaneously categorize and react to the world. Heuristic reliance, Blink, predictably irrational, 50 great myths. The mind doesn't calculate utility or probability for every decision. It uses mental shortcuts. We are predictably irrational because our shortcuts systematically introduce bias. We are influenced by anchoring, framing, and loss aversion, making us poor judges of objective value, the psychology of money. Our gut feelings are simply the output of this massive pattern-matching engine, highly effective in familiar domains but dangerously flawed outside them. Cognitive economy, the paradox of choice. System 1 defaults to the path of least resistance. This leads to decision fatigue and choice paralysis. The perception of maximum freedom, the paradox of choice, clashes with the biological need for cognitive efficiency, resulting in a preference for habit and simplicity. Atomic habits, tiny habits, the power of habit. Too much choice, actually, decreases happiness and increases anxiety. Emotion as information. How emotions are made, emotional intelligence. Emotions are not foreign invaders interrupting pure logic. They are the highly efficient embodied valuation system of the prediction engine. They are the mind's instantaneous summary of a complex situation, driven by past experience and core affect, guiding attention and action far faster than conscious deliberation. Emotional intelligence is not about suppressing emotion, but about decoding the System 1 output accurately and adapting behavior. B. The scarcity of System 2 and the imperative to think. Again, System 2, the deliberate, analytical mind is slow, serial, and resource-intensive. Its primary function is to step in when System 1 fails, or when a new problem defies immediate categorization. The central challenge of self-improvement is increasing the frequency and effectiveness of System 2 engagement. Intellectual humility and growth. Think again. Mindset, the scout mindset. The fatal flaw of System 2 is its propensity to act as a prosecutor or politician for System 1's beliefs, rather than a scientist testing hypotheses. We instinctively defend our existing worldview, mindset. The foundational, corrective is the growth mindset, and scout mindset, the scout mindset, which demand that we value the accuracy of the map more than the comfort of the current territory. Thinking again is the cognitive commitment to intellectual humility, the courage to question deeply held beliefs and abandon outdated knowledge. Attention as the scarce resource, stolen focus. The ability to engage System 2 hinges entirely on attention. In an environment designed for constant distraction and optimized for addiction, dopamine nation, the collective cognitive resource pool is fractured. Stolen focus highlights that external factors, technology, information architecture, actively cripple our ability to perform the deep work required by System 2. The struggle for grit. Grit is often a struggle to sustain attention against the flood of distractions and dopamine hits. 2. The architecture of change, habits, environment, and spiritual struggle. The second principle is the understanding that personal change is not a monumental act of will, but a function of repetition and environment. The texts emphatically reject the great man theory of change, replacing it with an architectural theory. A. Atomic systems and the reinforcement loop change is governed by the principles of positive and negative feedback loops, leveraging the prediction engine's preference for efficiency, habit stacking and compounding. Atomic habits, tiny habits. The fundamental unit of human behavior is the habit loop, cue, craving, response, reward. Change is achieved by making the desired a habit obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. Tiny habits introduces the concept of behavior, your motivation, plus ability, plus prompt, asserting that low ability, high prompt behaviors are the most sustainable starting point. Small changes, atomic in nature, are prioritized because they harness the I's power of compounding success over time. The environment is the architect, the power of habit, tiny habits. The self is weak against a deliberately optimized environment. Willpower is finite, system design is infinite. The key to lasting change is to engineer the environment to make desired behaviors. The default and undesired behaviors, the friction-filled exception. This principle extends from the physical office space to the digital consumption landscape. Motivation. Reevaluation, how to change dopamine nation. Motivation is not an innate fuel tank. It's a fluctuating state influenced by temptation bundling, commitment devices, and the alignment of identity. Dopamine nation reveals the neurobiological basis of indulgence. Our relentless pursuit of pleasure in an affluent society drives us into the territory of addiction, requiring a principle of pain-pleasure balance, the conscious reintegration of discomfort and meaning, the comfort crisis, to reset the hedonic set point. B. Meaning, responsibility, and the search for structure for change to be sustained, it must be anchored in a compelling narrative of self that transcends simple reward. Embracing structure and suffering. 12 Rules for Life, determined. 12 Rules for Life provides the philosophical scaffolding for behavioral change, postulating that meaning is found not in the absence of suffering, but in the voluntary adoption of responsibility. The inherent chaos of existence demands the creation of order, a principle of self-regulation and truth-telling, e.g., tell the truth, or at least don't lie. This is the philosophical framework for building a System 2 structure that guides the prediction engine. Even if determined suggests a lack of free will, the feeling of agency and the consequences of behavioral choices remain the primary drivers of life structure. Identity and the long game. Grit, inner excellence. The most powerful force in change is the shift in identity. The successful person is not one who performs a task, but one who is a certain kind of person, e.g., I am a writer, not I write. Grit, the sustained passion and perseverance for long-term goals, is the behavioral manifestation of this deep commitment to an identity. Inner excellence and the confident mind suggest that performance and success are ultimately rooted in the systematic control and reprogramming of the internal monologue and the self-concept. Third, the social matrix, connection, conflict, and persuasion. The final principle asserts that the individual mind is inherently and inextricably social. The self is defined, regulated, and changed in relation to others. Therefore, the dynamics of connection and influence are survival skills. A. Communication as a high-stakes exchange. Social life is an ongoing, complex interaction of System 1 and System 2 processes, where true understanding is rare and fraught with difficulty. Decoding the human signal, super communicators, how to know a person. Effective communication is not about merely transmitting data. It is about establishing and navigating what's happening in the conversation. the supercommunicator's framework of practical, emotional, and identity dimensions. The core skill is the art of seeing others deeply, how to know a person. This requires moving beyond surface-level judgments, actively seeking the hidden drivers of behavior, and creating a space of psychological safety, the fearless organization, where vulnerability and true insight can emerge. The power of listening and presence. Maybe you should talk to someone. The deepest form of communication is the act of witnessing. The therapeutic process, maybe you should talk to someone, and the principles of effective conversation, underscore that the primary human need is to be deeply seen. This is achieved through active, non-judgmental listening that allows for the emergence of a coherent self-narrative. The goal is connection, not correction. The introvert-extrovert divide, quiet. Social interaction is filtered through an innate neurological difference. Quiet establishes that society heavily rewards the stimulation-seeking extrovert, but the EY capacity for deep thought, focus, and sensitivity found in the introvert is a crucial undervalued resource. Both types require tailored environmental and social structures to operate at peak B, the science of influence and the dark side of human nature. The predictable irrationality of the mind makes it inherently persuadable, leading to both the potential for constructive leadership and destructive manipulation. Weapons of influence. Influence. Persuasion is systematic, leveraging System 1's shortcuts. The 6 universal principles: reciprocity, commitment, consistency, social proof, authority, liking, scarcity, are powerful because they are the exploitations of the mind's efficient defaults. Influence is the formalized study of turning the mind's heuristics into predictable triggers for compliance. Understanding malignance and manipulation, the psychopath test, the Lucifer effect, dark psychology. A small percentage of the population embodies the extreme end of System 1 dysregulation, psychopathy, characterized by a lack of empathy and a hyper-efficient predatory application of the principles of influence. Dark psychology is the unethical formalization of these persuasive techniques for exploitation. Furthermore, the Lucifer effect demonstrates that even psychologically sound individuals can be corrupted by the power of the system, contextual and situational forces, revealing the fundamental truth that situation can often trump disposition in predicting evil. The calculus of giving, give and take. The ultimate social strategy is revealed to be reciprocity, but specifically, the taker, giver, matcher framework. While takers, exploiters, and matchers, tit for tat, exist, the most successful people are givers who learn how to protect themselves from takers. This principle elevates the ethical choice, giver, to the statistically most rewarding long-term strategy, balancing self-interest with the imperative for collective flourishing. 4. Synthesis. The continuous work of self-architecture. The long-tail summary of this entire body of work is a single, integrated philosophical mandate. Life is the continuous, conscious work of architecting the self and its environment to align the irrational. Default system, System 1 with the chosen, meaningful goals of the deliberate system, System 2. The books provide the toolkit for this architectural task. Acknowledge and map the irrational. Accept that you are not rational. You are predictably irrational. Map your biases, predictably irrational, your emotional triggers, how emotions are made, and your internal narrative, maybe you should talk to someone. Engineer the environment for success. Do not rely on willpower. Design a world where the right choice is the easiest, most attractive, and most satisfying one. Atomic habits, tiny habits. Voluntarily inject constructive discomfort to maintain emotional balance. Dopamine nation, the comfort crisis. Cultivate intellectual humility. Commit to a growth scout mindset that values truth and learning over comfort and validation. Think. Again, mindset. View your beliefs as hypotheses to be tested, not fortresses to be defended. Embrace meaning and responsibility. Anchor your systems of behavior in a compelling pro-social identity. Grit, 12 rules for life. Take on the burden of meaning to inoculate against the emptiness of pure indulgence. Master the social field. Recognize that influence is the currency of society. Influence. Become a super communicator by seeing others deeply and creating a space of psychological safety. The ultimate social leverage comes from authentic generosity and the power of connection. Give and take. How to know a person. In essence, these books collectively form a modern manual for devoevery, not of pagan and Christian belief, but of the pagan, primal, automatic self, and the conscious, civilized, deliberate self. Success and happiness are the result of learning to recognize, manage, and constructively influence the primal self while continuously building the structures that support the conscious, intentional life. 3. The dynamics of meaning and mortality. The search for a coherent narrative. The final synthesized principle extracted from this body of work, drawing from the happiness hypothesis, 12 rules for life, build the life you want, determined, maybe you should talk to someone, and mind magic, is that human happiness and mental health are not passive states of comfort, but active achievements rooted in the continuous System 2 construction of a coherent, purposeful narrative that transcends the self, even in the face of cognitive determinism and existential chaos. A. The two-story mind, ancient wisdom and modern psychology. A unifying thread across these texts is the idea that the rational, modern mind, System 2, is built upon an ancient evolutionary foundation, System 1. The struggle for well-being is the struggle to reconcile the two, the rider and the elephant, the happiness hypothesis. This classic analogy is the fundamental psychological principle of the self. The rider, conscious, deliberate thought, tries to steer the elephant, the automatic, emotional, intuitive self. True happiness and virtue are not achieved through sheer force of the rider's will, but by taming and guiding the elephant through love, compassion, and systemic environmental design. The habit principles from Section 1. This synthesis bridges the gap between ancient philosophical wisdom and modern cognitive science, asserting that contentment requires both a virtuous inner life and a structured outer one. Narrative identity. Maybe you should talk to someone. The deepest function of the conscious mind is storytelling. We are not just a collection of habits. We are a collection of stories we tell ourselves about who we are, where we came from, and where we are going. Mental and emotional distress often stems from a stuck or incoherent narrative. The therapeutic process is fundamentally a joint effort to edit the story, to find a truer, more powerful, and less self-limiting narrative that allows for growth and forgiveness. The illusion of control versus practical responsibility, determined. 12 rules for life. The texts grapple with the profound conflict between our subjective experience of free will and the scientific evidence for determinism, determined. The synthesis is the pragmatic acceptance of responsibility. Regardless of whether choices are chemically predetermined, the individual must operate as if they have full agency. 12 rules for life. The creation of meaning is the voluntary adoption of a framework of order over chaos, demanding personal truth and moral action, which structures the perceived freedom of life. This philosophical stance is a necessary System 2 override to the potentially paralyzing implications of a deterministic worldview. B. The financial and emotional calculus of fulfillment. The principles of meaning-making extend into the most practical domains of life, revealing that financial success and emotional health are subject to the same cognitive distortions. Sufficiency and the end of greed, the psychology of money. Money, a central tool of modern life, is subject to extreme irrationality. The core truth is that financial well-being is not defined by how much one earns, but by sufficiency and time control. The greatest financial asset is calmness and the ability to stop the goalpost creep, greed. The failure to define enough is the fundamental cognitive error that undermines financial security and personal happiness, linking external wealth directly to internal emotional regulation. Cultivating happiness as a skill. Build the life you want. Happiness is a skill that can be systematically learned and built, not a destination. This requires conscious effort. System 2. In aligning external actions with internal values. The tools are explicitly articulated: managing feelings, self-investigation, and creating community. This reinforces the habit principles, Section 1, but elevates them to the level of emotional engineering, where the life itself is the ultimate product to be deliberately built. Intentionality and the brain's reality. Mind magic. The spiritual. Desire for manifestation, the creation of reality through intention, is anchored in the neuroscience of attention and expectation. The brain is a prediction machine, Section 1. Intentionality works by consciously directing the focus of the reticular, activating system, RAS, and the attentional networks to filter reality in alignment with a goal. This is not mystical power, but the high-level design of the mind's input and output channels, a System 2 process that leverages the brain's innate plasticity and prediction capabilities to make desired outcomes more salient, accessible, and psychologically achievable. C. The transcendent self and prosocial action. Ultimately, the most profound principle across these texts is that the pursuit of meaning must lead outside the self. The need for shared sacredness, the happiness hypothesis. Give and take. Human beings are wired for communal experience and transcendence. The deepest and most durable happiness is achieved when the individual connects to something larger than themselves, community, purpose, or a spiritual ideal. This explains the enduring power of groups, rituals, and institutions. The taker-giver matcher. Ethic, give and take. The individualistic pursuit of success is often less effective than the prosocial approach. The data shows that while takers sometimes succeed short-term and matchers maintain equilibrium, the most successful individuals over the long term are givers who protect themselves from takers. This is a foundational, counterintuitive business and life principle. Optimizing for others' success is the most effective long-term strategy for self-success, reinforcing the need for outward-focused, ethical System 2 behavior over pure self-interest. A life of openness and perspective. How to know a person, think again. The fully developed self is one that continually practices seeing the other deeply. How to know a person. This act of genuine curiosity and empathetic engagement is the antidote to the tribalism and emotional reasoning of the great untruths. Section 2. This ability to hold multiple complex perspectives, to think again, is the final irreducible element of intellectual and emotional maturity, allowing the individual to transcend their own predictable biases and participate constructively in the social matrix. This synthesis concludes that the life well lived is a masterpiece of self-architecture, built on a foundation of scientific understanding and ancient moral wisdom. It is a life defined not by fate, but by the conscious, courageous, and continuous construction of an inner framework that finds meaning in responsibility, resilience in discomfort, and happiness in connection. V. The integrated framework, a first principles model for human flourishing. The cumulative wisdom of this collection of texts coalesces into a singular, integrated framework that transcends disciplinary boundaries. The core, irreducible truth is that human flourishing is the result of applying System 2, deliberate mind, to manage and optimize System 1, automatic mind, by structuring one's internal narrative, external environment, and social engagements toward the continuous, voluntary adoption of constructive friction and responsibility. This framework can be distilled into 3 interlocking phases of human endeavor: awareness, architecture, and action. A. Phase 1. Awareness, the truth about the self, cognitive humility. The initial step toward mastery is realizing that the self is neither fully rational nor in default control. This phase is characterized by cognitive humility, a commitment to seeing the self and the world as they truly are, not as we wish them to be. The subjective experience of being flawed. Acknowledge the irreducible duality of the mind. You are fundamentally driven by an irrational, heuristic-based prediction engine, System 1, that prioritizes efficiency and comfort over objective truth, predictably irrational, blink. Feelings, while powerful, are not facts. They are data points, generated by this machine, emotional agility, how emotions are made. This rejection of the great untruth, always trust your feelings, is the foundation of mental health, the reality of context and bias. Understand that your temperament is a fixed parameter, e.g., introversion, extroversion, quiet, and your current behavior is heavily influenced by context and the system, the power of habit, the Lucifer effect. The world is designed to steal your focus and hijack your reward system, stolen focus, dopamine nation. Success, therefore, begins not with maximum motivation, but with accurate diagnosis of the self's vulnerabilities. The Scout Mindset. Cultivate the Scout Mindset, which values accuracy over comfort. The Scout Mindset. Think again. This is the continuous conscious practice of using the slow, deliberate mind, System 2, to audit and question the automatic beliefs, identities, and narratives supplied by System 1. The goal is intellectual honesty, to recognize that what you know is finite, and what you don't know, or are wrong about, is the greatest source of potential growth. B. Phase 2. Architecture. Designing the resilient life. Systemic design. Since willpower is finite and the mind is primarily an automatic engine, flourishing is an architectural problem, not a motivation problem. This phase involves deliberately constructing the internal and external environments to automate virtuous behavior and build resilience. Engineering the environment, the atomic principle. Do not fight bad habits. Render them difficult or invisible. Do not rely on motivation. Make good habits obvious and easy. Atomic habits, tiny habits. This requires a deep understanding of the habit loop, cue, craving, response, reward, and designing your physical, digital, and social world to frictionlessly guide you toward your goals. Embracing anti-fragility, the comfort crisis. Actively reject the cultural premise of safetyism. The self needs non-catastrophic stress to develop resilience and competence. This involves the voluntary adoption of friction, whether through intellectual challenge, the coddling of the American mind, emotional risk, maybe you should talk to someone, or physical discomfort, the comfort crisis. The purpose of life structure, 12 rules for life, is to create a scaffold that can withstand and grow from the inevitable chaos and suffering of existence. Constructing a coherent narrative, the meaning principle. The deliberate act of building a life structure must be anchored in a purposeful narrative that transcends the immediate self. Happiness is not the goal, but the byproduct of pursuing a meaningful, responsible path. The happiness hypothesis. This narrative shift, from I am a victim of circumstance to I am the architect of my response, is the foundation of emotional agility and is the ultimate intentional use of System 2 to define a purposeful existence. C. Phase 3. Action. The outward movement, pro-social engagement. The final phase recognizes that the optimized self must engage with the social world to realize its full potential. The ultimate expression of System 2 mastery is the move from self-optimization to pro-social engagement and ethical influence. The ethical strategy of influence. Recognize the pervasive power of influence and persuasion, both ethically and unethically applied. Influence, dark psychology. Mastery of the social field means recognizing the predictable triggers of System 1 in others, not for manipulation, but for effective communication, ethical leadership, the fearless organization, and conflict resolution. The giver's advantage. Adopt the strategy that is both moral and empirically effective. The giver's mindset. Give and take. Long-term success is maximized not by pure self-interest, taker, but by a genuine, protective generosity. This turns the social world from a zero-sum competition into a positive-sum collective action problem, where the individual's commitment to the group's success ultimately fuels their own. Deep connection and perspective taking. Cultivate the skill of seeing others deeply, how to know a person. This is the highest form of communication, supercommunicators, moving beyond transactional exchange to genuine empathetic curiosity. It requires the humility to see the complexity and inner world of the other, which directly counters the simplistic, tribal, us versus them mentality. This act of profound engagement is the final step in integrating the personal journey of self-mastery into the larger human project of coexistence and collective flourishing. This integrated framework is the long-tail summary, a continuous loop where awareness leads to architecture, which enables pro-social action, which in turn provides the data necessary for deeper awareness, ensuring the individual is perpetually moving toward a more resilient, meaningful, and ethical existence. It is the practical manual for living in the gap between the primal self and the civilized ideal.